And now we'll welcome David Allan Evans, who was born in Sioux City, Iowa. He is the author of 9 collections of poetry, including The Bull Rider's Advice, and most recently, The Carnival, The Life. He is the author or editor of 7 other books. He was appointed South Dakota Poet Laureate in 2002 and was a professor of English at South Dakota State University for 39 years. He was the first South Dakotan to receive a National Endowment for the Arts grant and also received grants from the Bush Foundation, and twice he has been a Fulbright Scholar in China. He lives in Sioux Falls.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Marianne, and appreciate very much being invited, and especially to read with my good friend, Phil Dacey. We've known each other a long time, and still read each other's poems. I'm going to read some poems from several books, and then read some recent ones. My poems are pretty short. My father was a pressman at the Sioux City Journal for 30 years, and now that we've moved back to the area of Sioux City, when I drive by the old place where they used to have that press room, it's now a 2-story parking lot. I still remember the noise and the quaking of the sidewalks and so on. This is a poem called The Story of Lava. Every time I smell lava soap, it is 1948. My father is bending over a long sink in the press room of the Sioux City Journal at 5 a.m. His gray long underwear peeled down over his white belly, a thin bar of lava tumbling over and over slowly in his ink-stained hands. The morning news has passed through his hands, out into the morning streets, into the hands of sleepy boys who fold it a certain way and fling it on porches and steps. But that is not my story. Lava is my story, and the morning news that lava can't rub off. It is my father bending over a sink, a thin bar of lava tumbling over and over and over slowly in his cloudy hands. A poem called The Poem I Couldn't Write. I think most writers experience what we call writer's block. This came after a long period of not being able to do anything with words on paper. The poem I couldn't write. Last night I gave up again, tossed the damn sheets in the wastebasket, turned out the lights and went upstairs. Brushing my teeth before the bathroom mirror, there it was, the poem I couldn't write. When I frowned, it frowned. When I smiled, it smiled. It had all my thoughts, all my feelings, all my wrinkles, exactly my age and 3 silver fillings in its jaw. When I switched off the light, it was gone. When I switched it back on, there it was, speaking without words to a wordless man. Many years ago, my wife and I were down in Tucson, Arizona, and we heard a well-known primatologist, Frans de Waal, talk about bonobos, and he had wonderful pictures of these animals that are very close to humans, being primates, and I was thinking of him and his talk because he, and when I was writing this poem and thinking about a dental appointment, cleaning my teeth, having my teeth cleaned, and then also of a poem. It seems like whenever I write a poem, all these things are coming into it, memories of other poems and lines and so on, and I was thinking of Robert Frost's poem, in which he called The Witch of Grafton, about a woman who dominates men. And Franz de Waal had talked about bonobos as being a very matriarchal society. And so I was thinking about those things. For the young woman who cleans my teeth, this is called. When I sit down and lie back, your white rubber hands come floating toward me as toward a death mask stretched over a crystal ball. I gaze or close my eyes, and we hold a one-way conversation as you scrape and pick, accepting my ahs and silences as consent. Sometimes you stop, lay down your tool, squirt water in my mouth. I slosh it around a few times with my spit, and you insert a plastic vacuum tube and suck my cheeks dry as alum. Then I rest my jaw, but whenever your tool appears above me, I gape like a baby robin to a dangling worm. We might be pair-bonded bonobos, one grooming the other, who, stunned by such routine joy, stares into trees and oblivion. We are so close, in our room so private, we might be lovers in bed. This way a little, you almost whisper, gently pressing on my temple. I obey every word all the way through flossing and polishing, and I love and honor once more the finishing touch of your smile, which sends me, with a new toothbrush sticking out of my shirt pocket and a gritty spearmint taste, back to the corroding daylight and job. A few poems from a book called This Water, These Rocks. Here's one called Girl Riding a Horse in a Field of Sunflowers. Sitting perfectly upright, contented and pensive, she holds in one hand loosely the reins of summer. The green of trees and bushes, the blue of lake water, the red of her jacket and open collar, the brown of her pinned-up hair, and her horse deep in the yellow of sunflowers. When she stops to rest, summer rests. When she decides to leave, there goes summer over the hill. I did a chapbook of poems called Some Guys, about guys I remember from my youth and later, and this is one of them. It's called Ronnie Perkins. Let's say the two of you are sitting next to each other on bar stools at Reitmeyer's Tap, drinking frozen schooners. Go ahead, mention to him the bona fide fact that you cleared 6 feet in high school track. Yeah, he'll say, I did 6'3". Go ahead, even if you know it's a bona fide fact that he was never on the school track team, ask him if he used the Fosbury flop for his jumping style. He'll look you right in the eye, squint a little to reinforce his credibility, and say something like, you know, now that you mention it, I don't remember. Hell, I just jumped. And then from the same book, Donald Dugan. In his final semester before retirement, even though he often forgets where he parks his car in the math building parking lot, it's not a problem. When he steps out of the door into the lot after his last class of the day, he simply hits the trunk button on his key device and listens for the sound of the trunk popping open like a hippo's mouth. Unless a car honks at exactly the same time, he almost always hears it, and it's not a problem if he doesn't. All he needs to do is walk or look around a bit until he sees the sprung trunk, a handy algorithm for an aging math prof, not to mention the impeccable sense of hearing. And then from my most recent book, The Carnival, The Life, it's called. A couple of poems. This one called Youth, Summer 1956. And I have an epigraph from Pindar, great ancient poet who wrote a lot about athletes in his poems. The epigraph is, "The season of youth is brief." So, youth, summer, 1956. "Here comes Kemp," said the tall sign on the roof of the rumbling wrecker truck. We paused, watching, Eddie at shortstop twirling his glove on his wiry wrist, me, the catcher, standing up, my hand raised to stop the pitch. We turned, watched the truck go by. "There goes Kemp," said the sign. And then a poem called "Watching Bull Riders." There's one moment I can appreciate. Just after the 8-second buzzer goes off, and the man who has stayed on top of the wide, hard back of a hyped-up beast for a successful ride now must figure out a way to get off without being kicked or stomped on, so he loosens his deep grip and begins to lean to one side of the animal, trusting it'll sense that he's falling off and will go ahead and shake him loose in the same direction he's leaning, which means that the rider, whether or not the bull knows it, is able to exert at least a modicum of choice as to where and how he's about to land. Whenever I see this, I understand better about trusting myself under some duress to do what's right, about leaning into a fear, allowing it to take me where it will, even if I end up, successful ride or not, with my face and teeth clogged with dirt and a sore back or knee. And now I'll read some more recent poems. A lot of these poems you'll realize are influenced by Asian poetry, and especially the contemplative traditions of the East. Many of them have epigraphs as well. Been reading that kind of thing lately. This is called "The Way of Life," and the epigraph is from Lao Tzu. "Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them, that only brings sorrow. Once when I was a boy, I had to know what a yellow caterpillar flowing slowly forward on a branch on a double row of tiny gripping feet might do next if I picked it off gently and put it on my outstretched arm. Yes, there was a change all right, but the caterpillar didn't seem to mind, since it kept on flowing right through the strange forest of my young blonde arm hairs in the same direction at the same pace as on the branch. Like Lao Tzu and the caterpillar, may I too get it right." Another poem on retirement called "An English Professor's Last Day Before His Retirement." Leaning over the department secretary's desk, he wasn't thinking about the 39 years' worth of blue grade books in packets wrapped with thick rubber bands, which he was about to hand over to her, but of the packets of poems, each tied neatly with twine, discovered in Emily Dickinson's dresser after her death. A poem called "Bible School." "Do you see this nickel?" said our tall Bible school teacher, standing before us, holding it up to show us kids in our early teens sitting dutifully on wooden folding chairs. "This nickel belongs to whoever right now has enough faith to come up and take it out of my hand." It sounded like a race to me, who loved to race, so I sprang to my feet and sprinted up to the man and plucked the nickel from his hand. He held me there by an arm for a few seconds, so all could witness his praise of me, a good example of a young person with faith. Then I went back to my chair, my heart still in the race. As he went on talking, I felt proud, not so much for showing any faith as for being the winner, if only of a nickel. This poem is called Letting Go Of. Letting go of this insane guilt lasting decades for not having learned the names of many trees, even those in my own neighborhood, my own backyard. Yes, I'm getting old, but more and more clear-eyed on such matters. If I haven't learned the name of something, then I'm not supposed to have learned it. Just being able to walk on grass or dirt right up to a tree is the main thing. Being able to look at it, as Whitman said, long and long. Being aware of rootedness and quiet power, the trees, my own, with a soft grip on rough, hard bark. And letting go of that too. A poem called Flashlight. And the epigraph here from the Upanishads. Not that which the eye sees, but that by which the eye sees. Returning from the bathroom in the middle of the night, just before I get into bed, I turn off my flashlight to avoid waking up Jan, and reach out blindly to put it on my small bedstand, fumbling to find a place for it among books and reading glasses, until I turn it on and off quickly, smiling to myself for being aware of a new awareness, using a flashlight to find a place to put a flashlight in. Okay, let's see. In sync in a Shopco parking lot. I was waiting in the car for Jan, with a CD of songs from the 70s playing. To pass the time, I was looking around and paging through my portable Hamlet, trying to find a favorite passage, part of it already on my lips, when Horatio is telling Marcellus about the sun rising over a hill. Then over the dashboard, I noticed that the beat of one song was exactly in sync with the rhythm of the steps of a man, too far away to have heard it, as he walked by me and up the concrete incline to his car. But that was evidently not enough, since my fingers found the passage, and then the man, for a moment, was walking in sync, not just with the song, but with the way the morn in russet mantle clad walks o'er the dew of yon high eastern hill. An easy resolve. From this day forward, in the final week of summer, having awakened to a sad email, I'll be the last person to say you can't be happy again soon after being sad. Only a few minutes later, I stood outside in the parking lot, about to drive to a gas station to buy a paper. Lacking a cloth, I had to wipe the dew from my car's back window with my warm hands. I felt the wet coldness with each slow swipe, patting my hands on my pant legs to dry them. I looked up at the pure, cloudless depth of the sky and felt the crispness in the air, another sign of a change in the weather. Driving away, I was happy enough. Mid-November, looking at a dictionary of cliches. The fierce wind moving through our backyard, clattering the leftover leaves of the apple tree, is in no hurry. But when I get to apple, and then upsetting the apple cart, I see myself hurrying as usual, and suddenly hitting a bump, my cart handles flying up and over, and all my apples spilling in a ditch. Not only that, but yesterday morning, I rolled right past the second window at McDonald's and forgot to pick up my breakfast muffins. Having dutifully paid the young woman through the first window, I page forward randomly, but stop at luck and then thank my lucky stars, which I do, feeling grateful not only for McDonald's pay and pick-up windows, but upset apple carts as well. Otherwise, how would I ever learn to curb my hurrying habit? which means I just stop at the stop sign and sit there while the crazed morning traffic whizzes by, taking full deliberate breaths. And when a gap appears, I turn and circle the block and drive back and retrieve my muffins, feeling doubly grateful because they've kept them warm. Or in the case of the spilled apples, I lower myself carefully down into the ditch and carry handfuls of apples back up the bank and load them into my cart, so that maybe, taking my time among the ells, just maybe in blustery November I can say I'm at least beginning to see the light or turn over a new leaf. To a tiny gray spider. Thank you for snaring every neuron of my attention by dropping straight down on an eyelash-thin filament from the garage ceiling all the way down to the cement floor, then fleeing into the shadow of the back wheel of my car. Dylan Thomas wrote, "The oak is felled in the acorn, the hawk in the egg kills the wren." I've always loved that. It shows that we change what we don't change. You know, I was as a kid, I was an athlete. I got my status in school from grade school on as an athlete, and it worked for me pretty well. And I'm still, in a way, mentally, emotionally, an athlete. And so here's a poem called Old Athlete. When he picks up a branch in his backyard after a storm, and it's thick enough to grip with both hands, it's now a vaulting pole. Ash become aluminum, then Swedish steel, then fiberglass. He looks up at a telephone wire, now a crossbar framed by blue sky. After lunch, on his daily walk, when he steps on a crack on the sidewalk, he hasn't broken his mother's back, but hit his marker with good timing, building up speed down the runway. When he walks upstairs to his living room, he leans forward as if he's about to take 2 or 3 stadium steps at a time to get in shape for football. When he's watching a long run on TV, he's ready to stiff arm a linebacker or a defensive back just before he crosses midfield or the chalk of the goal line. When he's sitting at his desk, he crumples a piece of paper into a ball, then aims and tosses it into a wastebasket about 6 feet away, sinking the winning shot at the buzzer. When he takes off his glasses while reading and touches his forehead, he's just taken off his sweat-soaked headband after a 2-hour workout in a Shotokan dojo. When he meets a man for the first time, he shakes his hand and smiles, having just finished or started a racquetball match. I'm not much of a rhymer. I started out writing, imitating Robert Frost and Emily Dickinson, and didn't last very long with that. I corrupted into free verse, I guess. But I have written a few poems with rhymes over the years. Here's another one called Old Athlete. First the legs go, which is quite a blow. And then you ask, the mind? Not far behind. It's true, sort of. My wife and I have spent a lot of time in China over the years, and here's a poem that came out of Guilin, China, when we traveled there a few years back. Guilin, very beautiful place in China. And in the Li River, close by, a lot of fishermen have these cormorants, these birds they've trained to fish for them. And they dive down and they have a ring with a string on their neck, and they can grab the fish, they bring it up, but they can't swallow it because that ring stops them from swallowing it. Guilin, watching a fisherman's cormorant on the Li River. I know what it feels like. Down there under the bobbing boat is something you need in the shape of a fish. But every time you dive and come up with one in your mouth, you discover with a ring around your sleek neck, it's not yours to swallow. And finally, I'll end with a short one called Gratitude. In the Eastern contemplative traditions, I've discovered that they make a very sharp distinction between thinking and seeing. Gratitude. Moving along uphill and downhill with uphill and downhill thoughts swinging wildly from branch to branch in my head, suddenly I was smiling and waving at a man in a white pickup, smiling and waving at me, for which I was grateful, having greeted, unthinkingly at that, my next door neighbor on his way to work. Thank you very much. All right.
I believe their books are for sale.